sex comedies came in all shapes and sizes, no pun intended. But it was refreshing to see a movie that acted out in a firehouse rather than on a beach during summer. Firehouse is a mid-80s comedy where both the comedy and the sex are hard to find. A badly run firehouse in a rundown part of a large American city has its work cut out for them. Fires are everywhere, and that's because the mayor of the city has hired an arsonist so they can tear down the crappy areas of town and make way for a new profitable complex. Cue the firehouse that gets tasked by getting, brace yourself, women in their battalion. Yes, women firemen. Have you ever heard of such a silly thing? I have not. Of course, this is the 80s, so stuff wasn't as advanced as we were here, right? Anyways, 3 attractive women join the 3 silly men and stuffed blooms. There's romance, there's sexy time, and there's some laughs. But you won't laugh very hard, and that sexy stuff isn't much to write home about either. You're better off watching a Playboy short with those kinds of firewoman if you want to see the full potential of sexy fire chicks. As for the comedy part, there's about a million comedies that are better than this one. I didn't smile, I didn't smirk, I didn't laugh. The plot itself isn't all that interesting, and the acting is subpar to say the least. Apparently Julia Roberts had a role in this film years before she became famous, but I didn't notice her, nor did I go back to find her. The movie is on YouTube for people who want to sit through this dreck, but I would advise not to. Steer clear, this fire fizzled out really fast. Check that. Getting It On is a sex comedy from 1983 that features the typical horny teenager. He's quite the video creator back in the day, having all kinds of equipment to spy on people. When a lovely girl becomes his neighbor, he decides to use that to his advantage by talking to her and spying on her with his video equipment. Surefire way to get in a girl's pants, of course. But this is a comedy, so of course, and there's more to this than just spying on his neighbor. He also spies on other people, other girls, and even teachers and faculty. And this is what the movie revolves around. It could make up for a good movie, right? Spying panties to solve a crime, taping boobies to solve problems. But alas, the problem created is mundane, and the solution to said problems and subplots is unbelievable and boring. There's slight nudity and a little bit of comedy, but this feels like a failed attempt to mix Ferris Bueller with sex. Regardless of the fact this predates Ferris Bueller, for people on the fence about the voyeurism part, no worries. That plot point gets abandoned pretty quickly for the most part, which quite frankly is the biggest problem this movie has. Ah well, at least the cover of the film looked interesting. Check that. Going All the Way, from 1981, about Annie, a teenager who wants to have a successful career. Ha ha. Just kidding, he just wants to get laid. In comes his slick macho semi-Italian friend who of course has all the tricks to get inside of a girl's panties. At least he pretends to be slick because his tips are quite awful. Both of them have girlfriends though, so they're already closer than most teens in these films, but alas, these girls still have some standards and refuse to put out not even a kiss for some. Harsh. Very harsh indeed. That's most of the film pretty much. 2 guys trying to get laid. Girls being girls. Will they eventually get it on? There's other people in the school that have a little bit more luck in that department, so most of the nudity and sex can be found there. But the overall film is pretty forgettable in the long line of sex comedies. There's a couple of scenes that go somewhere. Special mention to the girls in the car for numerous reasons. But by the end of it you'll just sigh. If Going All the Way was described as a sexual act, then it would resemble a lot like a one-burster before being able to put it in. Going nowhere fast. Something I, Robotron, of course never experienced myself. Going all the way, I a broken bar. Find out for yourself if you wish. Check that. Hot Dog the movie is a mid-80s sex comedy that doesn't play out on a hot beach vibe, summer camp or goofy college, but on a ski resort. What? A ski resort, you say? But how can we have bikini bodies on a ski resort? Well, it's possible. No worries. We follow Idaho farm boy Harkin, who is traveling to a Californian ski resort to participate and win in a freestyle skiing competition. While en route he stumbled on a free-thinking but adamant aspiring musician and hottie called Sunny. Together they go to the resort where they make new friends, European German enemies, and have fun in the snow. Having seen way too many sex comedies, it was novel to see one that happens in a winter landscape. We exchange bikinis for revealing jumpsuits, the sea for hot tubs, and add a whole lot of skiing and acrobatics while we're at it. There's plenty of extremely attractive women, among them none other than Shannon Tweed, who bears all multiple times, and plenty of stereotypes to add to the humor many noobs will frown upon. The main antagonist, named Rudy, is an arrogant champion with a very German accent and is the main chain in putting the Americans versus the European conflict on point. They don't go full Iron Curtain on it, unfortunately, but maybe it didn't need that anyways. What they do is go full wet shirt. I was amused to read, by the way, that the actor to the stereotypical Japanese man, who only speaks Japanese during the film, couldn't speak a word of Japanese and had to resort to memorizing Japanese lines to perform his job. He did a good job, I think, much like all the others in the film. It's an 80s sex comedy, so don't expect something groundbreaking. It's fun, it's sporty, more sexy and Playboy Channel than you would expect in the first place. Cool for the day and distinctly less goofy and oddball than other films of its ilk. Oh, and Hot Dog is a pretty layered title for this film, if I might say so myself. Smash that. Hot Resort is yet another mid-80s sex comedy where a bunch of clumsy and horny teens have to work at some resort and experience all kinds of antics while trying to get laid in the process. I wouldn't fault you for mixing this film up with, for example, Hot Chili or Private Resort, but where that second one is with Johnny Depp, the first one is in Mexico, this one is with that guy from that forgotten comedy show Perfect Strangers, Bronson Borky Pincho. We travel to the Caribbean where a bunch of nerds, geeks and goofballs have to work for the resort under the strict rule of a guy who thinks it's an army boot camp. They have to provide for the guests, who are either hot single chicks or horny adults, but clash with a bunch of snotty preppy rich kids who think they're better than everyone else, while also trying to get laid. Of course, people go on vacation to rest and get laid. That's just a fact of life. And so our lively bunch of geeky rebels attempt to get into girls' pants while the preppy dickheads try to stop them, all while neglecting their duties as hotel staff and awakening the ire of the general type character. It's all pretty forgettable and there's not enough laughs or boobs to make it memorable. I only found this movie on YouTube and the one scene with breasts was mosaic censored. Bronson Pinchot isn't the main character, so he's not there to steal the show either, and the girls, not getting nude, aren't to write home about either. Hot Resort is a very tame film that wishes it was a sex comedy and by far the worst of the three, running far behind Private Resort and Hot Chili. A shame indeed. Smash that. Oddballs is a Canadian comedy from 1984 that once again brings us to the wonderful world of horny teenagers and 20-year-olds that go to a summer camp that just happens to be under threat of being taken over by some rich yuppies. Touted as the Meatballs Killer, Oddballs is a very odd film with some extreme slapstick humor and a whole range of puns. Yes, a movie with a whole lot of puns, and I quite enjoyed it. In my defense, I like my humor like I like my women, dry. But Oddballs is very hard to find, except when you go to a specific YouTube channel that has the movie for you to view, and after watching the film I understand why it isn't well known like Meatballs or other of its kind. First, it's Canadian. Second, it has no real star power. It's derivative like many of the genre despite being a tad more out of the box than most of them. The sexual escapes are minimal, showing us merely the potential of lush breasts thanks to the hands-on nurse. There's some delightful political incorrect humor in it, and it almost feels like a Tex Avery cartoon at times. Oddballs is a mixed bunch. It's definitely on the so bad it's good list, but by a short margin. If you enjoy stupid humor, puns, goofiness and all of the good stuff, then be sure to check out Oddballs. I think people who appreciate the dry humor of Al Lowe, creator of iconic Leisure Suit Larry, will find this film enjoyable too. If not, then you might be best to stick with American Pie or the mothers over there. Check that. Over the Summer is placed firmly in the sex comedy category, but I don't know why people would. This movie is way more dramatic than even The Last American Virgin, but at least that one had comedy and plenty of titties to go around. Alas, Over the Summer brings us a young short-haired and slightly rebellious city girl who is forced to spend the summer in the country with her grandparents. Reluctantly she goes, remembering the good times she had there as a kid. But she is a teen now. Her mind is set on other things that are male and can make you feel good. Not that she knows how it feels, because of course she's a virgin. And so she gets a warm welcome from her grandparents and an especially warm welcome from her grandpa. It's at that point in the movie that you realize that something is up and that this is not like other sex comedies. Being a young girl in a hick town of course brings trouble, and plenty of things happen in a sort of weird love triangle that will keep you invested somewhat in the plot. That one thing that happened, you'll know what when you see it, lingers for a long time but doesn't really get addressed. I don't think that stuff like that was normal even in the 80s, so I figure they just didn't go there for a reason. Well, in my head they kinda do, but all that is just speculation on my part. All in all, Over the Summer portrays a more realistic and less romanticized look at summers in the 80s. There's some boobies, so at least we got that, but this is a far more serious movie than all the others. I personally wouldn't even call it a comedy nor a sex spoof. Most of the actors in the movie only starred in this film, and the movie is pretty much forgotten. It's not bad, it's just unmemorable, except for that short scene which, like mentioned, went nowhere. Check that. Preppies is a 1984 sex comedy about so-called preppies, not to be mistaken with preppers, something you might think when viewing the poster of an awkward dude holding a rifle. No, preppies are stuck-up people who are pupils in an expensive prep school. These preppies have a distinct way of speaking and dressing and generally think they are above mere plebs. Future politicians and reclusive corporate leaders, in other words. Booah. Anyways, our 3 college students are close to having their final exam and are threatened by the principal to do the work or face the consequences. They, however, would rather party and get laid, cause they are after all destined to inherit the wealth and power their family has. Too bad for one of them though, since passing the exams is a requisite to get the $50 million in inheritance. Cue a bunch of loose girls who are low on the social ladder that are tasked to keep our fellows from getting the money. Near unlimited money versus a night with some floozies. Difficult, right? Well, not really if you can keep it in your pants, but hey, 50 mil would allow for a lot more of that numb nuts. Anyways, Preppies is a mediocre sex comedy with some questionable actors trying to sound like preppies and valley girls. It has some moments, and to be frank, most of those moments are in the form of Linda Wiesmuir and her bunkers. The other 2 girls, who are of Playboy stock since this was supposed to be a Playboy Channel film, are okay too of course, but Linda is my personal preference. Unfortunately, it's still all very low on the nudity, and the quality of the film was pretty much as if it was taped from a VHS that has been run and rewinded a couple of times. Preppies can be dropped, though there's still Linda, and I'm adamant that they make a modern sex comedy called Preppers now. No clue how it would look, but I'm sure it'll be better than Preppies. Check that. The 80s were well known for a lot of things, but one of the things it's well known for by those who experienced it is, drumroll, boobs. Plenty of boobs in the 80s, and the amount of sex comedies showing us those lush knockers was staggering. All good stuff, since we ourselves were in our teens and fully aware of the female form. Alas, most of us didn't know what to do, and no one ever had anything happen to them that happens to the guys and gals in this movie. They also looked way better than our classmates, since they weren't played by teens but full-grown men and women in their 20s. Still, there's laughs and jiggly breasts to be gotten, so what are we waiting for? Anyways, in this film a group of college co-eds are trying to get laid while underperforming at their summer job. The familiar trope of horny teens going on vacation to get into each other's pants and thus completely ignoring the real adults who aren't getting laid at all. This film has some fun moments that are not linked to anyone getting naked or strutting in a skimpy bikini, though some of the scenes, and with one character in particular, is a bit stupid in its fourth wall breaking way. Check that. Wimps, pansies, sissies, weaklings, cowards, mice. They're out there and they don't get stuff done, except in the 80s where these wimps, also known as nerds, did get things done, and thus we get Francis, a wimp but technically not nerdy enough to be a nerd who gets recruited by the local football team in order to push up their grades. Because bad grades means the school will have to shut down, and so our weakling does the unthinkable, but will he do the unthinkable for himself too and get some of that nice soft feminine ass? Find out in Wimps, a 1986 sex comedy that lacks both the comedy as well as the sex. In fact, this leans more into the romantic movie as we have our main hero fawning over a girl that gets snatched up by one of the jocks he is tutoring. I won't say that there isn't some humor in it, but it's a far cry from the goofball stuff from all the other comedies in this genre. The story is endearing enough that Wimps can be watched as a light comedy. Sex comedy freaks like myself who enjoy more fraternity goofballs and naked titties will be left longing for a little bit more. Smash that.